The office building was always full of noise during the day, with phones ringing, people rushing around, and meetings happening in every corner. But in the early mornings and late evenings, when most people were either waking up or heading home, the halls grew quiet. In those calm hours, a man moved slowly through the building with a mop in one hand and a small cart trailing behind him. His steps were steady, his expression calm, and he rarely spoke unless someone spoke to him first. Most people simply called him the janitor, even though no one really knew much about him. He arrived before sunrise every morning, long before the first employee stepped through the door. He would unlock the side entrance, switch on the lights one by one, and breathe in the silence that he had grown used to. He liked starting his day this way, without chaos, without noise. Just an empty building and his own thoughts. He didn't mind the routine. He didn't mind the quiet. In fact, it gave him space to think. Every morning he began on the ground floor, sweeping the front area and wiping down the glass doors that collected fingerprints from the day before. Sometimes the night security guard would greet him with a nod, and he would nod back. They didn't exchange many words, but the two had a silent understanding. Both worked jobs most people overlooked. Both saw the building in a way others never would. As the sun began to rise, he moved to the elevators. He cleaned the buttons, polished the handrails, and checked the corners to make sure nothing was left behind. He always took his time with the elevators. For some reason, he felt they said a lot about the building. If the elevators looked clean, people assumed everything else was clean too. It was a small detail, but he believed details mattered. When the first employees began to arrive, many walked past him without even making eye contact. Some were too tired to notice anything. Others were too focused on their phones or rushing to their desks. A few offered polite greetings, but most simply saw him as part of the background, someone whose presence was normal but not important. There were moments he overheard comments, not meant to be cruel, but careless. Someone would whisper to another, "He's always here. Must be rough being a janitor." Or, "Imagine doing this every day." Sometimes people talked about their dreams, their goals, their promotions, and their next big steps in life. They spoke loudly as if his ears didn't work, as if he wasn't a person with his own story and past. He never replied or corrected anyone. He simply smiled gently and continued with his work. Every floor had its own personality. The third floor was home to the marketing team, who always left colorful notes and half-empty coffee cups behind. The fifth floor held the legal department, much quieter, much cleaner, and always smelling faintly of paper and ink. The seventh floor was the busiest. It housed the tech team, and he often saw people sitting on beanbags, running around with wires, or discussing problems that made no sense to him. Still, he cleaned each floor with the same care. He wiped tables, emptied bins, organized the chairs in straight lines, and refilled water stations. Some employees occasionally thanked him, but most didn't. He never expected anyone to. What they didn't know was that he noticed things others never paid attention to. A loose wire under a desk, a flickering light no one reported, a printer that made a strange noise 2 days before it finally stopped working. He observed everything without meaning to. It was simply how his mind worked. He liked understanding how things functioned, even though his job technically didn't require it. He often fixed small things around the building before anyone even realized something was broken. A squeaky door would quietly return to moving smoothly. A stuck window latch would suddenly begin to open again. The employees assumed maintenance had handled it, never knowing it was the janitor who had taken a moment to make things better. Most people only saw him pushing a cart with cleaning supplies, but no one saw the thoughts running through his mind. They didn't know that he paid attention to every detail, the way the building operated, the sounds it made, the changes that hinted something wasn't right. He never bragged about what he knew. He never volunteered anything more than necessary. He believed in doing things quietly. Sometimes during his short breaks, he would sit in a small corner behind the storage room where no one could see him. He would eat the same simple meal, bread and tea, and think about how much life had changed over the years. There was a time he imagined a different future for himself, a time when he thought he would have a different job, maybe even an office of his own. But life didn't go that way. Circumstances shifted, challenges came one after another, and he eventually took the first job he could find to support his family. He never told anyone at work about the things he once knew, or the skills he still carried inside him. He didn't think it mattered. The job he did now, though simple, was honest work. And he believed any job done with care carried its own dignity, even if people didn't see it one morning. As he cleaned the hallway outside the conference rooms, he heard two employees talking. Their voices were light, almost amused. "He's always here sweeping," one said. "Does he ever get tired of it?" The other laughed. "Probably not. That's all he does. Just a janitor, right?" They walked away without giving it another thought. He paused for a moment, letting the words settle. Not because they hurt him. He had heard worse, and truthfully. He didn't expect most people to understand him, but because it reminded him how easy it was for people to judge without knowing anything. He lifted his mop again and continued cleaning. He didn't know that soon the same people who saw him as unimportant would be the ones watching him with open mouths, shocked by what he was capable of. As the day continued, he finished his morning rounds and moved to the storage room to restock his cart. He checked his supplies carefully: cleaners, extra gloves, cloths, and the small set of tools he carried secretly. They weren't part of the official cleaning kit, but he brought them anyway. A screwdriver, a small flashlight, electrical tape, and a few other items he always kept with him. He never knew when he might need them. Throughout the day, quietly walked through the building, blending into the background like usual. He watched the employees rush past him, breathe heavily as they hurried from one meeting to another, or complain about the smallest inconveniences. He didn't judge them. Everyone had their own struggles. In the afternoon, he was cleaning near the break room when he noticed something strange. A large screen on the wall flickered for a few seconds, then returned to normal. No one else noticed. People were too busy making coffee or chatting with each other. He walked closer when the room emptied. He studied the screen longer, noticing a faint buzzing sound. Something inside it wasn't working correctly. He leaned in slightly and listened carefully. Yes, something was wrong. It wasn't urgent yet, but if left alone, the problem would grow. He kept this observation in his mind. The way he stored many details every day, even later in the day. As he moved through another department, he noticed a server room door slightly open. It was unusual because that door was always closed tightly. He didn't enter. Of course, it wasn't his place, but he made a note of it. He had learned to see patterns. When small things changed, they often pointed to a bigger issue waiting to happen. Still, he kept quiet. He always did. He believed that when the time was right, things would reveal themselves. By evening, the building began to empty again. People grabbed their bags and rushed out, eager to go home. Laughter filled the elevators. Phones buzzed. Someone said they couldn't wait for the weekend. Someone else said their day was exhausting. In all this movement, no one noticed the janitor sweeping slowly near the main entrance, watching as the building grew peaceful once again. When the last few people left, he locked the side doors, cleaned the reception area, and walked through each floor to make sure everything was in order. The quiet felt comforting, as if the building itself exhaled after holding its breath all day. He moved to the 5th floor and checked the rooms one last time. The flickering screen from earlier remained steady now, but he knew the issue would return. The hum from the server room still echoed faintly in his mind. Something was building up. Something big, but at that moment, he couldn't guess how important these small clues were. He didn't know that soon the entire company would face a crisis, and the same people who barely noticed him would rely on him completely. For now, he simply finished his work, turned off the lights, and walked toward the exit with tired steps and a quiet heart. He didn't need recognition. He didn't need praise, but the world was about to see that he was far more than the label they had given him. For now, though he remained what everyone called him, just the janitor at least, that's what they believed. The next day began like any other. Yet something in the air felt slightly different. The man continued his usual routine, arriving before the sun peeked over the horizon. He unlocked the side entrance, pushed his cart inside, and breathed in the familiar quiet that wrapped around the empty halls. It was a moment he always cherished, even if no one else understood why. This silence was his space, his time, the one part of the day where he felt fully at ease. He swept the front area carefully, wiping down every smudge on the glass doors with slow, practiced movements. The floors looked new again once he was done, and he stepped back for a second to make sure everything looked right. He always took a moment to check his work. It wasn't about impressing anyone. It was simply the way he believed things should be done. As he pushed his cart toward the elevator, he remembered the flickering screen from yesterday. The sound it made still echoed faintly in his mind. He didn't know exactly what was wrong with it, but he knew that technology rarely broke all at once. It always left clues first, and that buzzing sound had been a clue. He pressed the elevator button and waited. The doors opened with a familiar ding, and he stepped inside, rolling his cart with him. As the elevator rose, he looked at the small metal panel at the bottom corner. No one else would notice it, but to him, the screws looked slightly loosened. He wondered if someone had tried to open the panel recently. It wasn't his place to question things. But noticing small details like this had become natural for him. When he reached the third floor, he stepped out and began cleaning as usual. Papers were scattered on desks, pens rolled near the edge of tables, and half-empty coffee cups sat forgotten. This floor always felt lively, even when empty. The bright colors of the marketing team's sticky notes covered almost every surface. He smiled a little at the sight of them, messages and ideas written everywhere. As if creativity spilled out of the walls, he wiped down each desk, organized the space, and gently placed a fallen photo frame back where it belonged. He didn't look too closely at the picture. Some things were private, and he respected that. Even if the people in the building didn't always afford him the same respect, as he cleaned, he heard footsteps behind him. A group of young employees walked through the hallway, talking loudly about a new project. They barely noticed him as they passed, but one of them glanced at him briefly. "Morning," the employee said quickly. He nodded with a small smile. "Morning." A simple greeting warmed him more than most people would guess. Not because he needed attention, but because small kindnesses mattered. But those moments were rare. Later, as he continued his rounds, he reached the break room again. The large screen he had observed yesterday flickered once more. Only for a second, but enough to confirm something wasn't right. He paused beside it when no one was around and listened again. The faint buzzing was back. He knew this wasn't part of his job. He wasn't supposed to interfere, but something about it bothered him. Problems like this, if ignored, often grew into bigger issues. And if this screen was connected to the building's systems, most things were now it could affect more than just one room. He glanced around to make sure no one was watching and leaned closer. The sound seemed to be coming from inside the panel. He didn't have the tools to open it, and even if he did, he wouldn't risk being blamed for touching equipment he wasn't authorized to handle. Instead, he made a mental note. Again, he would keep an eye on it as he turned to leave. 2 employees entered the room, laughing about something funny they saw online. They barely noticed him. One of them brushed past him with a distracted apology, then went back to talking. He quietly stepped aside and continued with his work. The rest of the morning went on in the usual rhythm. He mopped floors, emptied bins, adjusted chairs that were out of place, and replaced broken light bulbs. All while quietly observing small things around him, noises, changes, patterns, sometime around noon. As he was cleaning near the tech department on the 7th floor, he noticed something else. A door that was usually locked the equipment room was slightly ajar. He hesitated for a moment. It wasn't his place to check inside, but he knew enough about the building's routine to recognize when something was off. He slowly pushed the door a little to peek inside, careful not to step past the threshold. Everything looked normal at first glance. The rows of machines blinked steadily with small lights. But on the far shelf, a cable hung loosely. It should have been connected. Again, not his job. He let the door close gently, not making a sound. Still, these small things stacked up in his mind like pieces of a puzzle he didn't yet understand. Later in the afternoon, he took his short break. He sat in his usual corner near the storage room. A small space with a single chair that probably no one else even knew existed. He took out his simple meal bread and tea and ate quietly as he sat there. He thought about how much people missed in their rush to get through the day. They moved fast, talked fast, and judged fast. Very few stopped long enough to notice anything deeper. He didn't resent them. People lived their own lives. They carried their own worries. He just wished sometimes that people understood that every person they passed had a story, even someone sweeping floors. When his break ended, he returned to work. He walked through each floor, checking if anyone needed help or if anything required attention. He repaired a loose door handle without anyone knowing. He tightened a chair leg so no one would fall later. Small kindnesses no one ever saw. By evening, the building started to calm again. People hurried out with tired faces, eager for home. A few said bye to him. Others didn't acknowledge him at all. He simply nodded and continued sweeping. When the corridors finally grew quiet, he returned to the storage room to restock his supplies for the next day. He checked his small toolkit again. For some reason, he felt he might need it soon. Something in his gut told him trouble was building up. He didn't know what yet, but he sensed it as he finished restocking. He walked through the building one last time before clocking out. He checked the break room again. The screen flickered longer this time, almost 3 full seconds, and then returned to normal. That wasn't good. He stood there for a moment, watching the screen silently. Something inside the system was failing. He sighed softly and continued on his way, down the hall, past 2 managers talking near the conference room. They looked stressed, whispering about a tight deadline, and how things could fall apart if anything went wrong. They didn't notice him standing only a few steps away. He kept walking. His job wasn't to get involved, but as he took the elevator down to the main floor, he couldn't shake the feeling that the little issues he observed were connected. The buzzing screen, the loose cable, the open equipment room door, the elevator screws. All small on their own but unusual when happening together. He reached the lobby and turned off the lights one by one. Leaving the building in darkness except for the soft glow of the emergency lights, he pushed open the door and stepped outside. The air was cool, the sky turning darker as night settled in. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the day on his shoulders. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but he felt something was about to change. And when it did, the people who barely looked at him would finally see the man they had been overlooking all this time. For now, he walked home quietly, carrying with him the silent knowledge that trouble was coming and he would be ready the next morning. The building felt different the moment he stepped inside. He didn't know what had happened yet, but the usual quiet he enjoyed was filled with a strange tension. Even before the employees arrived, the air felt heavier, as if the walls themselves sensed something was wrong. He locked the door behind him, pushed his cart through the empty lobby. The silence didn't feel peaceful today. It felt like the calm right before a storm. As he swept the front floor, he noticed the lights flicker faintly. Only for a second, but enough to make him stop and look up. He continued sweeping, but now his eyes kept drifting to the ceiling. Listening for anything unusual, nothing else happened. So he moved on to cleaning the windows, wiping away the fingerprints left behind from yesterday. But even then, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. He took the elevator up to the 3rd floor. The ride felt longer than usual. The machine hummed unevenly, like it was struggling to work. He placed his hand on the rail, feeling the soft tremble beneath the metal. Something is wrong, he thought. When the doors opened, he stepped out and heard voices echoing from down the hall. This early? That wasn't normal. Employees rarely showed up before sunrise. He pushed his cart forward, following the sound. At the end of the hallway, 2 managers stood outside a conference room, pacing back and forth. Their faces looked drained, full of worry. He tried not to stare as he walked past them. But one of the managers spoke loudly, clearly too stressed to notice him. It crashed again. And this time, nothing is loading at all. The team is trying to fix it, but everything is locked. They said something about a major system failure. If we don't get it working, we'll lose the contract. Kept moving, pretending he hadn't heard anything. But inside, his mind turned quickly. A system failure? The buzzing screen? The loose cable? The flickering lights, they might all be connected. He reached the marketing area and started cleaning as usual. But he couldn't focus the way he normally did. He kept glancing at the office entrance, waiting to see if more people arrived early. Sure enough, within minutes, employees began rushing in one after another. They looked panicked, talking quickly, typing on their phones. Some walked fast toward the elevators without even noticing him. The building was not supposed to feel this busy so early. He moved to the break room next. As he stepped inside, he saw the large screen flicker wildly, not just a quick glitch like before. It flashed white, then went completely black. He paused. That wasn't good. A group of workers entered behind him, arguing about the system issues. "I told them this would happen if the server wasn't updated," one of them said. "We don't even know if it's the server." "It could be the power grid," another replied. "Great, so we're all blind now." None of them looked at the janitor standing quietly beside the screen. None of them paused long enough to think that he might understand more than he appeared to. He left the room slowly, pushing his cart toward the next floor. When he reached the 5th floor, chaos was already unfolding. Employees crowded around desks, talking loudly, trying to get computers to turn on. Some screens showed error messages. Others stayed completely black. He walked through the disorder quietly, sweeping the floor as if nothing unusual was happening. But he listened closely to every conversation. "The backup system isn't responding," someone shouted. "Try restarting it again, it won't even restart." He didn't stop sweeping, but now his thoughts were racing. He had seen many clues over the past few days. Maybe this wasn't a simple failure. Maybe it had been building up quietly like a chain reaction waiting for the last piece to fall. He knew one thing for certain. The building needed help, serious help. But no one looked in his direction. He moved to the 7th floor, the busiest one in the entire building. As soon as the elevator doors opened, the noise hit him, people running around, calling each other, opening drawers, checking wires. It felt like a storm had swept through. He slowly stepped out. Watching the scene in front of him, the equipment room door, the one he had noticed open yesterday, was now wide open. People rushed in and out, carrying cables, tools, and screens. Inside, he could see blinking red lights on several machines. Oh, that wasn't normal. Red lights meant trouble. He walked past the room, glancing inside only briefly. He didn't want to interfere or look like he was snooping. Instead, he continued with his cleaning, pretending not to notice the chaos. But employees were too distracted to even look his way. He heard someone call out, "We need the main system back up before the meeting with the client." Another replied, "We're trying, but everything is frozen." He moved down the hallway, sweeping quietly as the tension around him grew thicker. Minutes later, a loud beep echoed from the equipment room, followed by someone shouting, "It's getting worse." He stopped sweeping. This wasn't going to fix itself. He looked at the room again, feeling a familiar pull inside him. Part of him wanted to step in, to help, to do something. Even though he worked as a janitor now, his mind still understood these things. He still recognized the signs of system failure. He still knew how machines worked. Those skills hadn't disappeared from his memory. He had simply buried them. But now the building needed those skills. Even if no one asked, he finished sweeping the hallway and walked slowly down the corridor, his cart moving beside him. He didn't know what he was going to do yet, but he could feel something building inside him. Something he hadn't felt in years. Courage, or maybe responsibility. As he reached the end of the hall, he heard employees arguing again. "We're out of options," one of them said. "This whole system will collapse if we don't fix it. We'll lose everything." He stopped walking. His heart beat harder. He stood there quietly, feeling torn. Should he offer help? Would they listen? Or would they laugh? They barely noticed him on normal days. Now, in a crisis, why would they trust him? But he remembered the little details he'd seen. He remembered how the building whispered problems before they broke. He remembered how he felt last night that something big was coming. Maybe this was the moment. He turned around and walked toward the equipment room. One of the senior employees noticed him approaching and frowned, confused. "Yes," the employee said impatiently, not recognizing him right away. He hesitated for a second. "I noticed some changes in the building the last few days," he said carefully. "The screen in the break room, the loose cable, the lights flickering. The employee blinked at him, and he swallowed. They might be connected. If I could look you? The employee interrupted. Look at the servers. He lowered his eyes slightly. I have some experience. The employee let out a short laugh. We appreciate the help, but we need trained technicians right now, not cleaning staff. The words were not cruel, but they stung a little. He nodded quietly, of course, stepped aside, letting people rush past him again. But as he stood there, watching the panic and confusion, something inside him refused to let him walk away. He couldn't stand by and watch the building fall apart, not when he knew what was happening, not when he could help. He turned and walked toward the back of the equipment room, where fewer people were gathered. A junior technician was staring hopelessly at a screen full of errors. The technician muttered, "None of this makes sense." He stepped closer and gently asked, "May I see?" The technician looked at him, confused but desperate enough not to say no. "Sure, I guess," the technician replied. He leaned forward, studying the screen. Error codes flashed repeatedly. He recognized them. Multiple system conflicts, power rerouting problems, a communication failure between the main server and the backup. It wasn't random. He turned to the young technician. "The connection in the side box?" "What side box?" the technician asked. He pointed toward the far corner. "That one controls the power distribution. If it's overloaded or loose, it will shut everything down little by little." The technician's eyes widened. I didn't know that." "Most people don't," he said softly. Together, they walked to the box. The technician opened it and gasped. Inside, several wires were loose, and one looked burnt. "How did this even happen?" the technician whispered. He didn't answer. He was already studying the wires. Another technician joined them, then another. Soon a small group crowded around, watching as he traced the wires with calm, steady hands. One of the supervisors finally noticed the crowd and walked over. "What's going on here?" the supervisor demanded. The young technician pointed toward the janitor with wide eyes. He found the problem. The supervisor stared. Before anyone could explain, the equipment room lights flickered again. A warning beep echoed loudly. Someone shouted, "The whole system is going to fail." The supervisor turned back to the janitor. "Can you fix it?" He exhaled slowly. "Yes," he said, his voice steady. "But I'll need space and time." The supervisor hesitated only a moment before calling out, "Everyone, step back." For the first time since he started working here, the room fell silent as people made space for him. He lowered himself to the floor, took out the small toolkit he carried with him, and began working. His hands moved with a confidence he hadn't shown in years. The chaos around him faded into the background as he focused on the wires, the circuits, and the connections. People watched in stunned silence. This entire time, they had called him just a janitor, but now they saw something else, someone who knew exactly what he was doing, someone they desperately needed, and someone who was about to save the entire building from shutting down. The moment had finally arrived. Everything was about to change. The early morning bell rang across the school halls, echoing softly through the empty corridors as the sun slowly climbed up the sky outside. While most people were just beginning their day, he had already been working for hours. He wiped his hands on a cloth and looked around the quiet hallway, making sure everything was in place before the rush of footsteps and chatter filled the building again. He didn't mind these quiet moments. In fact, he treasured them. They gave him time to think, to breathe, and to gently prepare himself for the busy day ahead. Some days were easier than others, but he had learned long ago that the only way to keep going was to move one step at a time, no matter how small. That morning, as he walked toward the main entrance, he noticed a group of students gathered around the notice board. They were whispering excitedly, pointing at something pinned on the board. For a moment, he ignored them and kept walking, but their excitement grew louder. "Is that real?" one of them asked. "It has to be," another replied. "Why else would they put it up?" He paused, curious but not wanting to intrude. Still, something inside him told him to walk closer. He slowly approached, and when the students noticed him coming, they stepped aside politely. Pinned to the board was a large poster announcing the school's annual event, a special competition that always brought the entire school together. Every year, students, teachers, and even staff members were allowed to participate. But this year, for the first time, something new was added to the announcement. This year's competition will include a special category open to all staff members, the poster read. The winner of this category will receive recognition at the end of year ceremony, along with a small scholarship fund to be used for personal growth, education, or skill development. He stared at the words longer than he expected. A scholarship fund for staff. Anyone could apply. His heart beat a little faster. He hadn't thought about going back to school in a long time. Life had taken him in a different direction. He had bills to pay, responsibilities to manage, and a schedule that didn't leave much room for anything else. But now, something inside him whispered that maybe this was a chance he shouldn't let slip away. One of the students turned to him and smiled. "You should join," the boy said. "You're good at things people don't know about." He felt his face warm. "What makes you think that?" he asked softly. "'Cause you're always fixing everything," the boy replied. "And you never complain. My dad says people who work hard in silence are usually better than the loud ones." The students nodded, and he gave them a small smile. Their words stayed with him long after he walked away. Later that day, during his break, he sat outside on a bench near the garden. The school had planted the garden years ago, and he often helped take care of it. He enjoyed watching things grow slowly over time: plants, flowers, and sometimes even people. He thought about the competition again, turning the idea over in his mind. Could he do it? Should he do it? There were doubts, of course. He wasn't young anymore, and he felt that deeply on days when his back ached from carrying heavy things. But deep inside, he also felt a spark he hadn't felt in years. That spark was hope. At lunchtime, I found himself standing in front of the main office. He wasn't sure how he got there. His feet simply led him, as if they knew what he needed even before his mind fully accepted it. Taking a deep breath, he stepped inside. A woman from the office looked up and smiled. "How can I help you today?" He hesitated, then pointed at the poster on her desk, the same one from the board. "I want to enter," he said quietly. Her eyes brightened. "That's wonderful," she said. "We've been hoping the staff would participate. What category are you thinking about?" He shrugged. "I'm not sure. I guess I want to do something that shows what I've learned in life. Something simple, something real." "We can help you figure it out," she said kindly. She handed him a form and explained each section. He listened carefully, nodding as she spoke. When she finished, he thanked her and stepped outside again. For the rest of the day, he carried the form in his pocket, touching it now and then as a reminder that he had made a decision. It was a small step, but it was more than he had taken in years. By late afternoon, when the halls were quiet and the classrooms were empty, he walked toward the storage room to put away his cleaning supplies. Inside, he found the tools neatly arranged, the floor swept clean, and everything in order, just the way he liked it. He sat on a small wooden stool and took out the form. He read each question slowly, thinking about how to answer honestly. He didn't have fancy accomplishments to talk about. He didn't have degrees or certificates hanging on walls. But he did have years of experience fixing things, helping people, and solving problems quietly. He began writing. The words came naturally, one after another. He wrote about the job he did, the people he met every day, and the small ways he tried to make the school a better place. He wrote about learning through hard work, about taking pride in simple tasks, about how every small effort mattered. He didn't write to impress anyone. He wrote from the heart. As he finished the form and folded it neatly, he felt a calmness settle over him. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was moving toward something bigger than himself, something that might change his life. The next morning, he submitted the form. The office staff thanked him warmly. He walked out with a quiet confidence in his step. For the rest of the week, whispers spread around the school. Students talked about the competition. Teachers discussed their plans. And some staff members even encouraged him when they passed by. He didn't know what would happen next, but he knew one thing for certain. He had taken the first step toward something new, something meaningful, and deep inside. He knew the journey ahead would surprise everyone, even himself. The day of the big event arrived quietly, without fuss or noise, but it carried a feeling that something important was about to happen. He woke up earlier than usual, even before his alarm rang. His small room was dim, and the morning air felt cool on his skin. For a moment, he just sat on the edge of his bed, breathing slowly, letting the weight of the day settle into his mind. He wasn't nervous. Not exactly. It was something different, something softer. It felt like gratitude mixed with hope. He had come a long way, far more than anyone knew. And today, whether he won anything or not, would stand in a place he never imagined for himself. He dressed in clean clothes, simple, neat, nothing fancy. He looked at himself in the mirror and saw the same face he saw every day. Tired eyes, quiet expression, lines that life had carved gently into his skin. But there was something else there, to a determination. When he arrived at the school, the building was already buzzing with activity. Students moved around excitedly, teachers carried boxes of supplies, and staff members hurried to get everything ready. The auditorium had been decorated beautifully, with long banners hanging from the walls and bright lights shining across the stage. He walked in slowly, feeling a mixture of pride and disbelief. He had helped clean this auditorium countless times, sweeping the floors and fixing the lights. But today, he wasn't here to clean. He was here as a participant. A teacher spotted him and waved with a big smile. "Glad you made it," she said warmly. "Your spot is ready backstage." He nodded, thanking her quietly before heading behind the curtains. Backstage was filled with people getting ready. Some practiced lines, some checked their props, and others paced nervously. He found a small space in the corner and set his materials down. He wasn't performing a dance or giving a dramatic speech. His entry was simple. He was going to share his story through a small presentation he had prepared. He didn't have flashy visuals or perfect grammar. What he had was honesty. As he waited, he thought about all the moments that led him here, the long nights, the early mornings, the countless days when he felt invisible. He remembered the students who greeted him kindly, the teachers who appreciated his help, and the office woman who encouraged him when he signed up. He took a deep breath and reminded himself why he was doing this. He wasn't trying to prove anything. He just wanted to show that no job was small, no person was unimportant, and no life was meaningless. One by one, participants went on stage. Applause echoed through the auditorium. Some performances made people laugh. Others brought a quiet hush over the room. When his name was finally called, he stood up slowly. His heart beat steadily. Not fast, not slow, just steady. He walked toward the stage, his steps firm but calm. When he reached the curtain, he paused for a brief moment. Then he stepped out into the light. The audience was large. Students, teachers, parents, even staff members from different departments filled the seats. For a second, he felt small, but then he remembered the words he wrote, the truth he carried, and he lifted his head. He began speaking in a gentle tone. He talked about his life, his work, and the quiet lessons he learned over the years. He talked about fixing broken desks, comforting worried students, who he found crying in hallways, staying late to help teachers prepare for events, and coming in early to make sure the school felt safe and clean. He explained that he wasn't sharing his story to ask for praise. He shared it because he wanted people to understand that behind every clean hallway, every repaired chair, every working light, there was a person who cared. The auditorium grew silent. Not a single whisper, not a single movement. People listened closely, eyes fixed on him. He continued, saying he hoped that anyone sitting in the room who worked quietly in the shadows would remember that their effort mattered too, that even if no one said it, their work made a difference. When he finished, he stood still, unsure of what kind of reaction he'd receive. For a heartbeat, the room remained quiet. Then, slowly at first, and then all at once, applause filled the auditorium. People stood up, clapping with genuine emotion. Some students even cheered loudly, calling out his name. He felt his throat tighten. For the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to smile fully. Not a small, polite smile, but a real one. As he walked off the stage, teachers reached out to shake his hand. Staff members patted his shoulder. A group of students gathered around him, telling him how inspiring his story was. Backstage, he sat down again, letting the moment sink in. He didn't need an award to feel like he had accomplished something. Just being hurt, truly hurt, was enough. But the event wasn't over yet. After all the performances ended, the principal stepped on stage to announce the results. He listened from backstage, not expecting anything. He had already received more than he came for. The principal spoke warmly about each category, giving compliments and encouragement. Then she paused. For the staff category, she said, "We chose someone whose story touched every heart in this room. Someone who reminded us what humility, dedication, and kindness truly look like." Her eyes scanned the room. "The winner is our school's very own janitor." He froze. People began cheering even before his name was fully spoken. His hands trembled slightly as someone guided him back onto the stage. The principal handed him the award, a simple plaque with his name engraved on it. She shook his hand with genuine respect. "You've shown us something very meaningful today," she said softly. "Thank you." He nodded, unable to speak for a moment. The applause washed over him again, warm and overwhelming. Later, when the event ended and everyone began heading home, he stayed behind to help put away chairs. Some teachers laughed gently and told him he didn't need to work today, not after winning an award, but he simply smiled. "It's okay," he said. "This is what I do." He didn't stay because he had to. He stayed because he loved the school and the people in it. It was his second home. When he finally stepped outside, the evening light had softened, painting the sky in warm colors. He held the plaque against his chest, feeling its weight not heavy, but comforting. He walked home with quiet pride, knowing the world might still see him as just a janitor, but today, they also saw his heart, and for him, that was more than enough. The next days at school were different. Students greeted him with big smiles. Teachers spoke to him with new respect. Even the principal stopped to chat with him every now and then. But despite all the attention, he stayed the same humble, calm, steady. He continued doing his work with the same dedication he always had. Fixing things, cleaning, helping, caring. But inside, something had changed. He finally believed that his life mattered not because of the award, not because of the applause, but because he knew, at last, that making a quiet difference was still a difference. And sometimes, the people who worked silently in the shadows were the ones who shined the brightest when given even the smallest bit of light.